Survival horror is truly a special entity in the genre of gaming. It's had many twists and turns in such a short span of time. From the foundations of Sweet Home, to the mansion of Resident Evil, the foggy town of Silent Hill, the facilities of Penumbra, the dark corridors of Brennenburg and Amnesia, and the Resident Evil remakes turning the wheel of time once again. The genre has come full circle with cracks in between doing something different each time, and others upholding the legacy of what came before. But with its story and universe to share, I myself have an indifference to how survival horror is made. I can bounce from Resident Evil to Amnesia and still have an enjoyable experience. Of course though, like any other genre, some bad apples end up being bitten, with only a sour taste in the mouth, and horror has many fruits to share, many flavors to understand and appreciate, but sometimes it's good to have something that is familiar, something that you recognize and see right through with. Take these games for instance. Take a moment to search each one, and you'll most certainly notice the variations between them, the fundamental differences that they have next to each other. But if you take these other games here, they have the same taste, and there's a reason for it, and it's what came before. Silent Hill as a franchise is something with its ups and downs. I'm still angry about this, by the way. But what it did for survival horror, encouraging the exploration of psychological trauma and introspection through deformed and twisted means, while still creating a memorable and enjoyable game regardless. There are more Silent Hill games that I can count, and that's not talking about the actual titles either, but the ones that encapsulate the same level of atmosphere and tension as well. Lost in Vivo, Lone Survivor, Cry of Fear, Afraid of Monsters. These games are the children of Silent Hill, with their own worlds, their stories, and their own choice of canvas. And in this video, I will be bringing another one to light, another one that is largely unknown, and one that has its moments and its criticisms. Project Crypt. Also, there will be spoilers, so keep that in mind. Project Crypt is a standalone conversion project created by Skullzone Interactive, who had taken direct inspiration from the bones of Cry of Fear, one of the best free horror games that you will ever play, and took the similar ideas from that game, but into the realm of the GZDoom engine. GZDoom is a heavily modified version of the Doom engine, and is pretty much the basis of almost every mod made for the classic Doom games today. It can do a number of things such as displaying full 3D, sloped surfaces, improved lighting and shadows, reflective floors, skyboxes similar to Quake 2 and Half-Life, the list goes on. It's the definitive method for modding projects, or better yet, making your own game. Games like Hedon, Blood Right, Vomitorium and Ashes 2063 were all made with GZDoom. Another amazing mod, Total Chaos, was also made with GZDoom, which was honestly shocking at the time of its release. Project Crypt is also a fully 3D game made with GZDoom, but features a setting and experience that is pretty much like Cry of Fear in every way, with its moody and depressive protagonist, the uncanny presentation of the surrounding world, and the unending feeling that something's not right, to the combat and use of your resources. It's all here, and unlike in the last video where I went over it briefly, I'm going to go into a bit more detail about it, what I liked and disliked about the game, as I explore the depths of a depressed man with fingerless gloves, with a gun and pills to swallow. Let's get into it. The premise of the game's story is that you play as a young man named Isaac, who from his appearance alone indicates that he's seen better days. You start off outside of the apartment complex that you live in. Around the area, everything seems kind of off, and the presence of early 3D models with twitchy movements faster than a Japanese bullet train makes your situation abundantly clear. You're fucked if you stay in the city and you need to get out. And what you get is a combination of several things along the way to admire, to appreciate, and to bang your head against the keyboard when you encounter its frustrating aspects. Not much is known about the protagonist himself other than that there are traces of severe psychological issues that the character is dealing with. And what we see in the game is a variety of abnormal figures that attack us within range, some being the same size and others being gigantic and more monstrous. If you've come from games like Silent Hill or Cry of Fear, you're going to notice a number of patterns, such as the appearance of the characters and the monsters, the means of managing your resources and which weapons are more effective against which monsters, the dark and colorless atmosphere of the game's world, the depressive tone of the music, etc. They all have these aspects in common. The mostly empty city streets where everyone is suddenly gone or turn into these monsters that you fight also presents some unnerving questions. Has the world ended, or is this all in my head? Questions that don't really get answered in this game. We do end up, however, meeting other characters that also inhabit the same world as the main character himself, where they all have the common goal of getting out of the city, as well as the doctor that you meet later on, claiming that he can help you, undoing the damage that he supposedly caused, which is indicated in the game's dream sequences, where you hear echoes of voices indicating that the character is a subject of sorts, whether it was for experiments unknown or if it was a distorted view of the character's perspective, of the doctors that were actually trying to help him all along. Games like Afraid of Monsters and Cry of Fear also exhibit these same elements in their own stories, where you continue exploring the game and unraveling the story at the same time, coming to the conclusion that not everything is as it seems. Speaking of Project Crypt's story though, there are a lot of holes. A lot of important questions go unanswered. The characters appear at odd times and sometimes do things that don't even make sense to begin with. Like this scene where Albin and Isaac get separated by a large pipe, and he says that they need to split up, even though it's obvious that he could just simply climb through it. Or another instance where the player is tasked with collecting 5 gas canisters for the car, even though it took you an eternity to get to that car to begin with, the other character could have just done it himself. Okay, quick rant here. This is the worst part about the game, and there are 2 reasons. The map is oversized with a lot of it being the same, and you have to take 1 canister at a time in order to respawn the next one. I wish it was made so that you could just collect all 5 of them at once, or have a means of transportation where you'd have to carry it by other means. Okay, moving on. Its story was a mix of different ideas that weren't explored enough, and the conclusion to it all was rather disappointing, leading to no further insights regarding the reality of the situation or the character's past, the only evidence being a photograph of 2 people, but I couldn't find anything else beyond this, and I felt like I was left with an incomplete story, so to speak. However, it does make up for a lot of other things. Its atmosphere, its gameplay, and its implementation of 3D. Given the limitations of the GZDoom engine's ability to display full 3D graphics, this game does a good job of pushing the engine to its limits in the same way as Total Chaos did. The gun models and the reloading animations look fantastic, with great attention to detail but insanely slow reloading times. By the time I fully reloaded the revolver, I had already grown a full beard. Yeah, it's that slow. But the enemies, however, oh boy, they don't have that issue at all. In fact, the soldiers that you encounter later on are like Usain Bolt levels of stupid in terms of speed, and they hit like a truck as well. Player movement though is quite nice, but inventory was somewhat awkward and very limited with the way it was designed. You can only use 3 weapons at a time while having extra space in the bag, provided that you don't need the lantern or the flashlight or the healing items like the pills and the bandages, which I would keep because you are going to need them. Combat itself is pretty similar to Cry of Fear, with twitchy enemies either shoot from a distance or melee you up close. Project Crypt has a nice range of melee weapons and guns that you can find throughout the story. In the beginning, it'll be in your best interest to keep the knife for some enemies, while the stronger enemies and ranged ones should be dealt with by using a gun. Identifying the opponents and their weaknesses have always been a crucial part in survival horror gaming, and this game is no exception to that case. The twitchiness of the enemies though is something I'm 50-50 on. The mercenary soldiers are stupidly fast even though it makes no sense for them to act this way, while the other monstrosities you face are uncanny and nightmarish by design, so it makes more sense for them to be fast in both movement and speed. If you're not good with aiming, you'll have trouble with some of the even faster enemies, and especially these guys that jump on you when you get close enough. And that was another thing I wanted to get out of the way. This game is very hard, and at times it can feel impossible, especially when you're faced with the mercenary soldiers that shoot you with shotguns and rifles, as well as throwing grenades at you. It's not a very fun time when 1, you have to manually go into your inventory for healing or to get another item, and 2, reloading is very slow, and 3, if you die, you may have to restart the whole section again. In GZDoom, you're given the benefit of manual saving and quick saving, but not in Project Crypt, because instead it auto-saves when you reach certain checkpoints, so don't take a break too early or else you'll regret it big time. The weapons themselves have some nice early 3D style animations, mostly with the melee stuff anyway, and like I said, some well done animations on the way some of the guns were handled. It makes you wonder how much further the GZDoom engine could go, given the fact that the majority of Total Conversion projects made with GZDoom are sprite based, whereas this game uses fully 3D polygonal models, not to mention the cutscenes themselves alongside some clever scripting that appears from time to time, like the helicopter scene for instance, or the train. Given the fact that it is 3D is also another plus to the game's criteria. On any other engine, this game would look really bad, and to be honest it does, but the fact that it was done in GZDoom is really impressive and I'm able to forgive the fact. For those that want more out of the game's graphics, may be better off looking elsewhere. The levels themselves are largely the same, from underground sections to city streets and buildings with varying interior designs. There are 4 acts and the majority of them are spent in the city. If the game's atmosphere and setting is not doing it for you, you'll get bored of it pretty quickly. For me though, I felt that they had done a good job with the layouts and the occasional rooms and places like the shopping mall, the dream sequences, the suburban town, and the bridge section. Everything in between though is more or less the same, and I felt like I had been here hours ago early on in the game. But I suppose it comes with the territory when you're playing through a Silent Hill inspired game. The same lifeless scenery with occasional change in colour, even if for only a brief moment. The game doesn't have much of it, but there are some interesting moments of interaction, like with the computer showing a built-in operating system that you can interact with, something I didn't even know was possible in GZDoom. The puzzle sections are scarce and don't ask much out of you. Some are just putting the right combination together or figuring out where to find the code for a locked door. The game could have used more puzzles though, and not ones that required searching a gigantic map where you had to deliver one gas canister at a time. In terms of music, you don't hear it much, but when you do, it's sombering and somewhat pleasant as well. A combination of piano or soft guitar-centric music that quietly rests in the background as you have a moment of respite, or ambient music to build up further tension. The music had somewhat an Eastern European feel to its music, something that you would hear in a game like Stalker, another game dear to my heart. A lot of the times though, it's just dead silence, and for me that's okay, because a horror game needs to do more than just adding creepy music to make something scary. The thing I find with Project Crypt is that it does some things very well, while also missing the mark on certain things, like the story that feels half-baked and lacks cohesion in comparison to its main sources of inspiration, gameplay that is both enjoyable but also really frustrating at the same time, that I would recommend the easier difficulties for a first-time playthrough. You'll see why later. The game has a good length, but there were times where I felt like it was dragging on and I kind of wanted it to be over, which is why I generally prefer shorter horror games, because you can still get a potent experience without it overstaying its welcome. And again, I appreciate the efforts and the lengths to modeling the game in 3D, as well as some of the other things it does try to implement, and let me tell you, 3D game development is a whole nother thing compared to 2D based development. But I felt that the monster models could have been rendered better, as well as the environments, especially when you see something like Total Chaos, which doesn't even look like a Doom game at all, but something that you'd see made with Unity. With the bad stuff aside, you're still left with good gunplay, great atmosphere and music, creepy monster designs, and well-made levels, even though a lot of them blend together. At the end of the day, Project Crypt is still a commendable achievement in what the GZDoom engine is capable of when it is used by people that seek to push the engine to its limits. It took what Cryfear did and implemented it in a far more limiting framework, whereas Cryfear was founded from Half-Life's rendering capabilities and then later on in its development cycles, the rendering capabilities of Paranoia, another mod for Half-Life that I would highly recommend checking out. What you get in Project Crypt is a passion project that is an enjoyable but frustrating experience at certain times. The game is completely free as well. You can download it on Steam and give it a crack. But if you've already played Afraid of Monsters or Cryfear and you're expecting something better than that, then you're going to be very disappointed. Nevertheless, if you're looking for a criminally underrated Doom conversion project, then Project Crypt is definitely one worth looking at still. Thank you for watching.
What the? Who? Who's there? Hello? Come out. I won't hurt you. I promise. Hey, man, this isn't funny. Okay? Listen. I can help you. I can help you. Just stop doing this. All right?